That opening shot of The Sound of Music is really the quintessential picture postcard shot, really. And yet that we had such terrible difficulties shooting that scene.
The Sound of Music has always felt flawless, a picture-perfect movie where every song hits and every scene sparkles. But behind that polished charm lies a chain of real-life surprises, mistakes, and messy truths that somehow slipped into history. Even perfection, it turns out, has its bloopers. Julie Andrews, who embodied Mariah, didn't even know how to play the guitar before filming began. She had to learn from scratch, fumbling through chords while singing in front of cameras. The pressure was so high that sometimes she'd take a small sip of Austrian schnapps just to calm her nerves. Christopher Plummer also tried lessons for his role, but the film eventually replaced his playing and vocals with professionals. So when you hear those perfect notes, that's movie magic, not Captain Von Trapp. Speaking of chaos, remember the lake scene where the rowboat flips? That was a real accident. Kim Karath, the little girl who played Gretel, couldn't swim. When the boat tipped, Julie Andrews lost her footing and fell the wrong way, leaving Gretel to sink under the water. The poor kid swallowed so much water she got sick and threw up on her castmate, Heather Menzies. Everyone panicked, but once she was safe, the crew kept laughing about how close that disaster came to tragedy. Meanwhile, Christopher Plummer hated every minute of filming. He thought the story was too sugary and even called it The Sound of Mucus. Between scenes, he drank and ate out of boredom, gaining so much weight the costume team had to keep resizing his clothes. Still, years later, he admitted he'd misjudged it. The world saw beauty where he only saw fluff, and time forced him to respect that. The famous Von Trapp mansion, pure illusion. The filmmakers stitched together multiple estates, one for the front, another for the back, and rebuilt the interiors on Hollywood sound stages. Even the romantic gazebo from 16 Going on 17 was a man-made prop, later moved twice before settling at Hellbrunn Palace in Salzburg. The graveyard escaped from the Nazis, not Austria at all. It was shot on a Los Angeles set, while Salzburg tour guides still claim otherwise to this day. Then there's Edelweiss, the song that fooled the world. Everyone assumes it's an ancient Austrian hymn, but it was written in the United States by Rodgers and Hammerstein specifically for the show. It was the last song they ever composed together before Oscar Hammerstein's death, turning a Broadway tune into what people mistook for a national treasure. Maria von Trapp's real story, though, wasn't so romantic. In 1956, she sold the rights to her life for only $10,000. A German producer convinced her foreigners couldn't earn royalties. A total lie, and she signed away everything. He later returned offering $9,000 in cash if she agreed instantly, and desperate for money, she did. When she learned the truth, she'd been robbed blind. Still, she refused bitterness, saying the joy her story brought to people was worth more than any lost fortune. And that story itself, Hollywood twisted it from the start. Maria was never hired to tutor all 7 kids, just one. Captain Von Trapp's daughter, also named Maria, was recovering from scarlet fever and too weak to attend school. The 21-year-old novice from Nonnberg Abbey went to help for 10 months before becoming a nun, but destiny had other plans. Casting Maria was another miracle. Screenwriter Ernest Lehman wanted Julie Andrews and no one else. Director Robert Wise wasn't convinced until he saw unreleased Mary Poppins footage and realized she was perfect. Julie hesitated, afraid the film might feel too sugary, but when she learned they wanted authenticity, she agreed. Her $225,000 contract turned into one of cinema's most iconic performances. The real Captain Von Trapp wasn't the stern, whistleblowing commander the movie showed. He was affectionate, humorous, and gentle. His son Johannes once said, he was a charming man, generous and open, not the strict military father they made him out to be. It was actually Maria who needed to learn warmth. Her strict upbringing made her more rigid than he ever was. Another unsung hero missing from the movie was Father Franz Wasner, the family's true musical director. He discovered their talent when they rented rooms to survive the Great Depression and turned them into professional performers. He traveled with them across Europe and America, shaping their sound. But Hollywood replaced him with a fictional manager named Max Detweiler because they thought a priest might distract from Maria's spotlight. The real Mariah wasn't quiet or saintly either. Orphaned young and raised by a cruel uncle, she grew up wild. At the Abbey, she talked when she was supposed to be silent, broke dishes, whistled sacred chants, and even climbed the roof. She once admitted she'd been horrid, the worst you can imagine. The movie's calm, smiling version barely scratches who she truly was: rebellious, passionate, and alive. Even her marriage wasn't born out of instant love. Georg von Trapp was 25 years older, and Maria originally agreed to stay for the children, not him. She said if he had asked her directly to marry him, she would have refused. But he spoke carefully, asking her to remain as a mother to his kids, and she took it as God's guidance. Love came later, quietly, built on duty and shared struggle rather than lightning bolt romance. And that dramatic mountain escape everyone remembers? Fiction. They didn't hike over peaks at night, they took a train in broad daylight, pretending to go on vacation. Georg had Italian citizenship from his birthplace, making their exit simple. They traveled through Italy to London, then boarded a ship to America with their conductor and secretary. In Vermont, they built a life, opening a guest lodge that still stands today, owned by their descendants. Despite the grandeur on screen, the Von Trapps were struggling financially long before they fled Austria. The Depression wrecked their fortune, forcing them to rent out rooms and eventually perform for income. Captain Von Trapp hated putting his children on stage. It felt undignified, but necessity pushed them forward. Their voices captivated audiences, and by 1936, they'd won a national competition that launched their global career. The movie also shrank the family for simplicity. In reality, there were 10 children, 7 from Georg's first marriage and 3 with Maria, but Hollywood only kept 7. The oldest, Rupert, wasn't a teenager like Liesel. He was a grown doctor by the time they left Austria. The names, ages, even personalities were altered for storytelling rhythm, not historical truth. Music, however, was never forbidden in their home, as the film suggests. The real captain encouraged it. He and his late wife filled the house with song, and the children grew up harmonizing daily. Maria didn't introduce music to them. She simply helped it survive through hardship. Their wedding timeline also got rewritten for drama. On screen, it looks like they marry under the shadow of Nazi occupation, but in truth, they wed peacefully in 1927, long before Hitler rose to power. Maria was 22, Georg 47. They built their family, added 3 more children, and lived quietly until politics forced their flight a decade later. Christopher Plummer almost never played the captain. The studio chased big names, Bing Crosby, Sean Connery, but Robert Wise wanted Plummer. The actor refused multiple times until Wise met him personally in London and promised to let him shape the role into something less dull. That deal sealed it, and Plummer's brooding presence balanced Julie Andrews' sunshine perfectly. Ironically, The Sound of Music ended up saving the studio that made it. 20th Century Fox was nearly bankrupt after Cleopatra's production costs exploded from $2 million to $44 million. The studio was bleeding money and desperate for a hit. Executives doubted audiences still cared about musicals, but when The Sound of Music premiered in 1965, it became a worldwide phenomenon. It dominated the box office, dethroned Gone with the Wind, and turned into the highest grossing movie ever made at the time. The profits pulled Fox back from collapse and kept Hollywood alive for another era. Behind the dazzling songs and sweeping hills lies a film stitched together from struggle, actors doubting their parts, accidents on set, financial near disaster, and truths bent for storytelling. Every smile you see on screen came from real chaos and exhaustion behind the lens, and maybe that's what makes it timeless. The Sound of Music wasn't built on perfection, it was built on people trying, failing, and somehow finding harmony through it all. From Julie Andrews fighting guitar strings to Maria von Trapp signing away her legacy, the story has always been about courage under pressure. Even the smallest mistake became part of its magic. Decades later, audiences still hum Do Re Mi, unaware that every flawless moment hides a dozen hidden stumbles. And maybe that's the true legacy. Imperfection so beautifully performed it became unforgettable. If you enjoyed this look behind the curtain, remember, the next time you watch those mountains and melodies, you're seeing not just art, but endurance. That's the real sound of music.